Okay, so we just got done talking about the shoulder pads. Now on to, let's see, what do we got next? Gauntlets. Okay, so the gauntlets are huge, unfortunately. They can be futzed to not stick out real far, so that they don't stick out so much when viewed from the front. But a problem that is just extremely obvious is the elbow pads. They stick way out. Now I've modified mine so that they don't, and it's a pretty extreme modification, so not everybody's going to want to do it. I just simply cut off the elbow pads. Okay, so from some angles it can look a little strange because it's no longer attached, but unless you're comparing it to a screen capture, you might not know that that's how they're designed. I mean, it looks just like the knee pads, which aren't attached to anything. Okay, so that doesn't bother me. I've never been a big stickler for screen accuracy as long as it looks good on the shelf. Okay, so I think for most angles this looks excellent. All I did is use my good old X-Acto blade, which I use a lot, and just cut it off. I didn't even do any filing or anything. You could if you wanted, because it is a little bit unsightly there if you're looking right at it, but I didn't bother. I have heard people mention that they can be bent and that they will hold the shape. I'd like to see that. I haven't yet. My only concern is that it just isn't going to look as clean as this. I mean, this is obviously sticking right to the elbow at all times, and it looks real. It's got real sharp lines to it. The glue that I used is Quick Grip. This is a favorite of mine when working with anything plastic or rubber. It apparently works really good for fabric too, because it's sticking on here nice. The advantage to Quick Grip is that it doesn't get crusty the way super glue does. It does, like the name implies, it does stick fast, and it remains flexible. So whenever I'm gluing rubber, that's what I use. I've used it on the DX12 figure. At the back of that figure, you might be able to see just a little bit of glue there. The shirt came off of the pants, and I glued it on there, and it's stayed perfectly ever since. As a little sidebar here, on my DX12, on the DX2, I'm using the DX12 belt, and that's just wired in place with twisty tie that the paper's been removed from, so doesn't look the greatest from behind, but holds it in place. And I prefer doing that rather than a permanent modification to this belt and cutting it, because I might use it in the future with the DX12. So that's that. Getting back to the DX12 gauntlets. Some people have replaced them with Medicom gauntlets, which are the exact same construction. In other words, there are holes there which show the fabric suit. I think that looks pretty good, actually. My only problem with the Medicom gauntlets is that because they are so much smaller, it leaves a lot of the fabric suit showing between the gauntlet and bicep armor, which this looks a little strange to me. If too much of the fabric suit is exposed, it looks a little bit too much like a sweatshirt or something. So I prefer the larger gauntlets to too small of gauntlets. So I'm quite happy with them just as they are, modified the way I have. You want to make sure that when you glue this in place that you're bending the elbow at the right spot. You don't want to bend it at the upper elbow joint. You want to bend it at the lower elbow joint, and then stick it on there like that. Very important posing note is that you always want to bend at the more distal elbow joint. Otherwise, it makes the forearm look too long. I'll illustrate that in the DX02. Forearms are already too long, even posed correctly, but if you pose it incorrectly, then you have that ridiculously long forearm. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Another option is to use the DX2 gauntlet. To me, that is not an option. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. Different construction altogether. You know, it doesn't let the suit show, and it's a different color gray, and it just looks real cheap compared to the DX12 Gauntlet. Alright, getting a little bit long-winded here. Let's move on from the gauntlets to the gloves. If you do one modification to this figure, I highly recommend modifying the gloves. So, the stock gloves come with a buckle, just like the DX2. These are the same exact gloves as the DX2 gloves. So I've cut off that band. This wasn't my idea. In fact, most of these ideas aren't mine. But at any rate, I cut that off using an X-Acto blade and again an emery board to file it a little more precisely. I'm going to actually see if I can demonstrate this for you because I still have to cut two of these yet. So just to show you how easy this is. Try not to cut my finger. Let's see. Make sure you can see that. And sticking it in initially might be a little scary if you've never done anything like this before, but once you get it in place, it's pretty easy to just follow that edge around. And you want to use a nice, sharp X-Acto blade. If it's not sharp, you're not going to be as precise, and because you're using more force, you could easily cut yourself. Even just then, I used a little bit too much force and cut through. And that's it. Done. So you want to try to just follow that line real nice, and then if you want it more precise, go ahead and get your emery board and file that down. And the reason this is so important, and I say it's the one modification you're going to do if you're only going to do one, is that for one thing, the gloves are tucked into the gauntlets on the in the Dark Knight costume. That's about the only thing that sets the Dark Knight costume apart from the Dark Knight Rises costume. It's the only thing that sets that apart from the Dark Knight costume. And it just makes the forearm length look much more natural. All Hot Toys figures tend to have overlong forearms. I'm not sure what the reason is for that. But using the right joint on the elbow and then shortening that glove makes the forearm length look a lot more natural. And then you can file it to get just the right angle. I always like to have my wrists bent in just a little bit, so you can take that into account when you're filing. Sorry, I'm going a little bit out of frame here again, as I tend to. But again, if you're going to do one modification to this figure, I highly recommend that. It'll set this figure apart from your DX02 figure and make it definitively Dark Knight Rises. Okay? And it just looks so much better to me. Very easy to do. Alright, on to the next thing, which would be the oh, yeah, that's right, I painted the abs. This is a very subtle modification. All I did is paint the little straps between the abs black. And actually I need to do a second coat because some of these are starting to look, after they dry, they look a little bit more gray again. But to illustrate, the color of gray that the biceps are is what those ab straps were. And I just used a flat black acrylic to, and this is called ivory black, which does have a hint of gray in it. I think if you were to go to a really, really dark black, for example Mars black, it might stick out, it might look a little unnatural. I wanted it to be about the same color black as the actual abs are themselves. So, I don't know, it just makes those straps kind of fade into the background a little more. It just kind of popped a little bit too much when they were the same color, black or gray, as the bicep straps. Okay, so there's that. Now on to the belt. The belt is easy to remove once you find out where the holes are. That's it, on and off. Just a matter of knowing where that seam is. Yeah, I guess I didn't do any modifications to the belt. The belt's great as it is. One thing to bear in mind when posing with it is to make sure that it slopes down enough, otherwise it starts to have this kind of weird angle when it sits against the crotch armor. Let's see, can you see that? Whereas if you get it up high enough, It has a much more natural look to it. And I'm running out of time again here. All I have left to show is the boot modification, rather the ankle modification, and I will dedicate one whole video just to that. Alright? So stay tuned.